Dr. Mahalia V. Ravago is Associate Professor at the Department of Economics at Ateneo de Manila University. Her research interests include energy economics, economics of natural disasters, development economics, and resource economics. She was the program director of the 2014 to 2018 USAID grant, Energy Policy and Development Program, or EPDP. She served as the president of the Philippine Economic Society in 2018. She received the 1UP Faculty Grant Award in Economics for Outstanding Research and Public Service in UP Diliman. This was in 2016 to 2018, when she was assistant professor at the UP. In 2016, she was awarded the Outstanding Young Scientist in the field of economics by the National Academy of Science and Technology. She earned her BS in Business Economics and MA Economics from the University of the Philippines. She obtained her PhD Economics from the University of Hawaii at Manoa in 2012 under the East-West Center Graduate Degree Fellowship Program. Please welcome with me Dr. Mahalia Ravago.
Good morning. Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction, and thanks to you and Dr. Concepcion for inviting me to be part of this session. So this paper is co-written with Professor James Rumaset from the University of Hawaii. Okay. The Philippines Medium-Term Development Plan for 2017 to 2022 is anchored on Ambisyon Natin 2040, which targets attaining a high income target for the Philippines in 2040. In fact, the country is poised to meet this target. The Philippine economy is on a high trajectory since the beginning of the current decade. For the period of 2010 to 2019, the average growth was 6.3%, which is the highest 7-year average since the mid-1970s. And concerns about attracting generation investment is what we have before 2020 because electricity consumption was expected to grow to nearly 4 times its 2018 level by 2040. Now, come 2020, enter the COVID-19 pandemic, and the forecast for the Philippines turned sour, falling into negative territory to as low as here 7%. Okay, now, it is commonly believed that because of its low fuel cost, high plant costs, and high ramping inefficiencies, the least cost generation mix involved using coal as the baseload fuel. So we have here on the graph is the load profile for any time of the day, and you have here the baseload, which is coal, because it has the comparative advantage in serving the minimum load over a typical 24-hour period, such that it can run at a nearly constant rate at or near maximum capacity. In contrast, you have here the open cycle gas turbine plants because it's low plant cost and greater ramping flexibility. And you have here the CCGT, or the combined cycle gas turbine, because it has a high plant cost and also greater ramping flexibility. Now the question is, how do we determine the least cost mix, or how do we know when CCGT will supplement the baseload coal and when do we use the fast peaking plants OCGT? The economist Josco proposed to use screening curves. Now, what is screening curves? It's a screening curves plot average cost as the linear function of annualized fixed cost plus variable cost per hour times the number of hours used. So this one determines at what load per hour the base load generation begins to be supplemented by the intermediate fuel type, and when those two are further supplemented by the peaking fuel type. So in another paper, I written it here, we did the analysis and apply screening curve for Luzon. So this one. So applying the analysis and projecting the demand up to 2025 and including pollution cost, what we found is that coal is the least cost generating fuel for the low demand hours of 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. So this means that for the other hours, it should be supplemented by intermediate peaker plants, and for the peaker demands of 1 and 2 p.m., it will be supplemented by the fast peaker plants. Note that what is run during the base load can be run all day. Now, during the lockdown, we of course know that demand falls. Now there is excess capacity. The problem becomes choosing which plant to use and which to leave idle. So from the screening analysis, it suggests that coal would be the sole generating source for more hours of the day. Now, in reality, just the opposite happened. So we see here that coal generation fell dramatically from 56% to 48%. Why this paradoxical result? There are two reasons. One is the inflexibilities in legal rules and contracts. RE's renewable energy source are assured mass dispatch status as per the Renewable Energy Law of 2008. Thus, the system operator is required to accept whatever is generated. Second, there's inflexibilities of the supply of gas arriving by pipeline. So we have these take or pay bilateral contracts with Meralco that assure minimum purchases of natural gas generation, which reflect this inflexibility in gas delivery. Now, this leaves the burden of adjustment falling on coal plants, a number of which have had to temporarily shut down production. Now, turning to the effect of lockdown on electricity prices. Okay, so wholesale rates on the spot market fell by 55% during the lockdown period. And then going to the retail rates, specifically for Meralco service area, we actually saw an increase from March to April, but this is really due to the normalization of the universal charge rate. Please also note that in April, ERC suspended the collection of the feed-in tariff allowance in our bill. Then in May and June, we see here a decline in the retail rates for Meralco because they have availed the force majeure provisions in their PSA, thus allowing them to pay a lower fixed charge, which reflected in our bill. Now, given this, we still had the bill shock or the electric shock, right? So what Meralco did is to use the December to February average to bill customers for March and April. In fairness to Meralco, they are just really following what is stated in the distribution code. There's a provision in the distribution code that was issued by the ERC. Now, why the widespread confusion and complaints? I think the shortcoming of Meralco is that while they announced that they're going to use the 3-month average, it was not, I guess, appropriately communicated that when the lockdown is to be lifted, we will be billed, okay, or there will be some adjustment in the actual consumption that we had. Please note that when the lockdown happened, we have also experienced a very high temperature. In fact, international observers are calling it extreme heat wave. So if you look at the electricity consumption last year for 2019, Meralco is averaging December here, January and February of 2019. If you look at the consumption in April and May, our consumption is really much higher. So thus, when the actual electricity consumption was billed to us in May when the lockdown was lifted, now complaints ensued. Okay, so pursuant to Machiavellian credo of never letting a crisis go to waste, some observers advocate acceleration of the transition away from coal towards renewable. This is actually specified in the RE Law of 2008, wherein it's specified as an aspirational target of 35% renewable by the year 2030. Now, looking at the share of renewables in dependable capacity, it's already at 31%, okay? But the DOE rules specified that the 35% should be attained in terms of generation. So in terms of generation, what we have here is 23.4%, which is somewhat more difficult to attain. Now, given the gap, 35% versus the 23% in the actual generation, the question is, are subsidies for RE still necessary? So note that the lesser levelized cost of electricity for wind and solar for the US are already below those of coal and natural gas. The cost of intermittency are quite modest given the abundant opportunities for diversification, the falling cost of battery storage, and possibilities for demand management. Greater renewable mandates and subsidies could compromise the objectives of affordability, reliability, and security embodied in the EPIRA and also in the Tax Reform Act of 2017. Mandates and subsidies also put RE advocates at loggerheads with the DOE's declared technology neutral policy. So given that the solar is so cheap and its intermittency manageable, the question is, why is adoption so slow in the Philippines? Is the feed-in tariff subsidies are actually retarding the transition? Now, pitting consumer welfare against the environment is a false dichotomy. Consumer welfare is maximized by the least cost generation mix after including the social cost of pollution. Given the rapid reduction in solar costs, diversification possibilities, demand management, and cheaper storage, the transition towards renewable is coming. We are not denying that. The role of government is to facilitate an efficient energy transition and not to force it prematurely with costly subsidies. Now, one might ask, what do we mean by this efficient energy transition? Okay, by efficient, we mean the least social cost. So the efficient energy transition should take into account the falling cost of wind and solar and the low cost of managing intermittency. Taxes should reflect the marginal damage cost of pollution, especially from generation with coal. The coal and petroleum excise taxes are part of the 2017 tax reform. So this is already a step towards the right direction. Pollution taxes can harmonize the quest for renewability with affordability and other objectives of EFIRA. So it's just really leveling the playing field. The social cost of pollution, which is included here when we determine the least social cost, this includes both domestic costs from carbon emissions and the cost of local pollutants that impinge on health. The local pollutants include the sulfur oxide, nitrous oxides, and particulate matter. These local pollutants are actually far more costly. The damage cost add-on for natural gas is very small compared to coal. Existing subsidies should be phased out in accordance with competitive cost wind and solar power. Other policies can complement the ability of the market system to deliver energy efficiently. One would be safeguarding competition by free entry and generation and into generation and retailing. Another is the planning of investment in transmission in accordance with generation investments that minimize social costs and not according to investors' demand, as what happened in Negros. Aligning retail rates more closely with marginal costs, including real-time pricing, can lower the cost on intermittency, lower rates, and deliver greater benefits from the power system. Some concluding remarks. Given that utility-scale wind and solar projects are cost competitive with coal and natural gas, probably or perhaps an investigation is needed into the relatively small investments into those sources. It is likely that bureaucratic requirements of FIT subsidies are actually retarding investment relative to free market levels. Existing coal plants and some new LNG plants can be part of an efficient transition towards renewable. And as a final remark, using COVID-19 to justify further subsidies is likely to be counterproductive. So we did this commentary and it's published in the East Asia Forum magazine, and an elaboration of this commentary is released as a working paper at the Ateneo. This is posted at the Ateneo de Manila Department of Economics website. And forgive me for the shameless advertisement, our book is still available at the UP Press online store. Monching, Jeff, and Sarah have all their respective chapters in this book. So thank you very much.